Lee Krasner was a very formidable person and not easily daunted, and she decided very soon after Pollock's death to continue to make this series of paintings. And she was asked by an interviewer afterwards, how do you manage to do that? How do you paint in the depths of that degree of grief? And she says, painting is not separate from life, it is one. It's like asking, do I want to live? And my answer is yes, and so I paint.
Thank you, Eleanor, for being here today to come in and speak with us a bit about Lee Krasner and the incredible painting Eyes the First Circle. It's been 20 years since there has been a major exhibition devoted to Lee Krasner. Can you tell us about the show that you are organizing that will open at the Barbican later this year?
Absolutely. Lee Krasner has quite an important history with the UK. In 1965, Brian Robertson organised a major overview of her work, which came to London, to the Whitechapel, and then toured around the UK. My experience of spending time with Lee Krasner's work is that it's incredibly physical painting, and it has a very visceral impact upon the visitor. And because in the UK and indeed in Europe, people have generally only been able to engage with the work in reproduction, this is a fantastic opportunity for people to really feel the full impact of her painting, as well as her collage and her works on paper, in the flesh.
We know that Lee Krasner was married to Jackson Pollock, but she was a very accomplished artist in her lifetime. Can you tell us a bit about Lee Krasner, who she was, and what motivated her in her work and practice?
Krasner's born in 1908 in Brooklyn. She's the first child to be born in the US in her family who've emigrated from Russia. She grows up in a household where they're speaking Russian and Yiddish, and she's the first child to feel really like a Brooklynite. And she's very much going against the grain when she decides to become an artist. She makes that decision at 14 and really stays true to that vision, despite it being an incredibly difficult climate for anybody, but particularly a woman, to become an artist at that time. She meets Pollock for the first time in 1941 because they're exhibiting together. So they're showing together in John Graham's show, French and American Painting, at the Macmillan Gallery, and he's the only artist on the list that she doesn't know. She's familiar with de Kooning, she's familiar with Stuart Davis, and she doesn't know him, so she chooses to visit his studio. And the relationship to Pollock, of course, becomes an important one. They share their house in Springs, Long Island, until his death in 1956. But it's really only one chapter in a much longer story of her life as an artist and a woman.
Can you tell us about the course or evolution of her artwork, starting with the little images up until the umber paintings? One thing that's so remarkable for me about the little image paintings is they really captured the all-over painting spirit that, of course, Jackson Pollock became so famous for and known for.
When she's working on the little image series, she's working in a very controlled vein. So she's generally working on a tabletop, on a flat surface, and she's working from an aerial perspective. So she's often thinning down oil paint with turpentine in a can, and she's working with small brushes. So the point at which she starts to work with unstretched canvas tacked to the wall, it's worth remembering that she's about 5'4" in height, and she refers to these as very gestural physical paintings because it required an entire performance for them to be made. And she would often try and go into a painting, and she would really work on it and work on it and work on it until she felt it had reached a point of completion. A painting like this, she felt relatively uncomfortable going into and leaving and going into and leaving because she wanted it to have that freshness about it, which is again one of the reasons why it doesn't feel overpainted, it doesn't feel thickly layered in the way that some of her earlier little image paintings were.
Can you talk about why her work is changing in the late 1950s? What's changed in sort of the circumstances in her life, in her working space, that lead to these much bolder, larger scale paintings?
The major change, of course, is the death of Pollock in 1956. There is already change afoot, so she had decided to go to France in the summer of 1956. It's the first time she travels to Europe, and she spends time in Paris, and she travels to the south and really kind of drinking in the history of French painting. Just before she'd left for this trip to France, she'd painted a painting that would become known as Prophecy, which I suppose we would think of today as being very heavy in allusions to Picasso, particularly Demoiselle d'Avignon. It's a very anguished painting. The colour palette is very raw, incredibly fleshy, and she spoke about the degree of uneasiness she felt at the time of painting it. One of the quite touching things that Krasner and Pollock would do for each other was when they made something that felt like it was threatening to them, they would pose the question to the other one, is it a painting? He assured her and said, absolutely, keep going, don't walk away from it. That was the painting that hung on her easel at the point at which she leaves for France, and of course she's in Paris when she receives the call from Clement Greenberg to say that Pollock's dead. She decides to move out into Pollock's barn, his studio space. It must have been a very loaded space emotionally, but she's very practical. It's the largest space, it has the best natural light, and suddenly it allows her to take unstretched canvas, to tack it to the wall, and to make paintings that are 15 feet in length, which she has never done before. The Umber series really occurs at the peak of this moment of her discovering the possibilities of scale and the possibilities of this new space.
Can you tell us why she sort of decided to pare back color, what the role of color is in these works?
The Umber series, as the title suggests, are made predominantly in raw and burnt umber, as well as white. They're made in oil. She really enjoyed the organic properties of working in oil, and the color has that organic quality as well. Umber was something that she could really make her own. And she speaks of it as a very practical gesture, that she was working at night, she was suffering from extreme insomnia, and she had been trained quite formally as a colorist and believed that it was almost a criminal act to work with color without natural light. And so working with umber allowed her to continue to work even in these very difficult circumstances. She does a very interesting interview with the poet Richard Howard, who was a great friend of hers. It was Richard Howard who'd actually suggested the title for this painting, The Eye is the First Circle, which comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. When she speaks to Richard Howard, she says, I was going down deep into something which wasn't easy, it wasn't pleasant. You know, she speaks of it as a descent into the depths of grief. She spoke very eloquently in the interview she did with Richard Howard about wanting to ensure that much of this brushwork remained very light. You know, it has this very feathery quality to the mark making, and that for her was about staying close to that original impulse. She wanted all of what was driving her to make this painting to remain very alive within the work. It's remarkable that it manages to retain such strong impact today.
It will be exciting to see how this painting fits into your exhibition, but can you talk about how this painting fits into the story of Lee Krasner overall?
In many ways, she considered it a kind of pinnacle moment. She chose for it to be included in the 1965 exhibition that Robertson did at the Whitechapel and worked very closely with him on that, and likewise the show that Marcia Tucker organised in 1973 at the Whitney. Again, it then became a major part of Barbara Rose's retrospective at MoMA in 1984. At these various moments when Krasner's work has been appraised, The Eye is the First Circle has been a really important means through which to consider the achievements of her career.